My beloved child, before you decide this message is just another story, give your heart a few quiet moments. Don't skip. Some words arrive too late, while others appear at the exact moment they are needed most. Imagine receiving a letter from someone who has spent far too long hiding behind fear, pride, and silence. The envelope is worn from being opened and closed countless times, as though the writer kept changing their mind. Every sentence carries the weight of things that should have been said long ago. This is not a promise about your future or a prediction about someone in your life. It is an inspirational story about what can happen when people finally stop running from the truth inside their own hearts. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and every chapter reveals another piece of a mystery that refuses to stay hidden. There was a quiet evening when everything seemed ordinary. The city lights shimmered through the rain, conversations drifted from nearby cafes, and people hurried home without noticing the stranger sitting alone with trembling hands. That person had spent months pretending everything was fine. Friends believed the smile. Family believed the excuses. Yet deep inside, every passing day became harder than the last because one important message had never been delivered. The words were simple, but saying them felt impossible. I should have been honest with you. The silence had become heavier than any rejection could have been. Every memory returned like a forgotten melody, reminding them of moments where one brave conversation could have changed everything. They wondered if it was already too late, or if hope still had one final chance to be heard. At last, the decision could no longer be postponed. A notebook was opened. The first sentence was written, erased, then written again with shaking determination. Please leave everything for just a moment and read this, because something happened that made me realize how fragile time truly is. Those words were not written to create fear, but to express urgency born from regret. For the first time, pride stepped aside and honesty took its place. The letter continued with memories, unanswered questions, and quiet confessions that had been locked away for far too long. Yet just as the final page was about to reveal the real reason behind this desperate message, the writer's phone began ringing again and again. The caller's name on the screen changed everything, and what they heard next made them freeze in complete silence. Part 2. The ringing refused to stop, echoing through the quiet room like a reminder that some moments cannot be ignored forever. The writer stared at the screen, unsure whether answering would bring relief or even more confusion. After a long pause, they finally picked up. The voice on the other end was calm, but noticeably different. "I've been looking for you," the caller said. "Not because something terrible happened, but because I finally understand something I should have seen a long time ago." Those words settled into the room with unexpected weight. Don't skip. What sounded like an ordinary conversation was about to uncover emotions that had remained buried beneath years of misunderstanding. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. The caller explained that a chance conversation earlier that day had changed everything. They had met someone who knew pieces of the story neither of them had ever shared before. It wasn't gossip or dramatic secrets. Instead, it was a simple reminder that every disagreement has two perspectives, and every silence leaves room for assumptions to grow. As the conversation unfolded, the writer began seeing familiar memories through an entirely different lens. Moments once believed to be rejection now looked like hesitation. Words that once felt cold now sounded like fear disguised as distance. The more they listened, the more they realized that neither heart had ever truly understood the other. Sometimes the greatest barrier between two people isn't a lack of love, it's a lack of honest conversation. When the call finally ended, the room felt strangely different. The unfinished letter still rested on the table, but now it no longer seemed complete. Another page was needed. Another truth had to be added before it could ever be sent. The writer reached for the pen once more and carefully wrote, "There's something I discovered today that changes the way I remember us. If you read nothing else, read the next page with an open heart." Just as those words were finished, an old envelope slipped from between the notebook's pages and fell onto the floor. It had never been opened. The handwriting on the front looked painfully familiar, and what was hidden inside that forgotten envelope would reveal a truth neither person had been prepared to face. The forgotten envelope rested on the floor as though it had been waiting for this exact moment to be discovered. The writer picked it up carefully, noticing the edges had faded with time. Dust clung to the corners, a quiet reminder of how long it had been hidden. For a few seconds, they simply held it, wondering whether opening it would finally bring peace or awaken emotions they had worked so hard to bury. Don't skip. Some answers arrive years after the questions are asked, and when they do, they have the power to reshape every memory that came before them. With a steady breath, the seal was gently broken. Inside was a single handwritten page, folded with remarkable care. The first sentence stopped the writer in their tracks. "If you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to tell you these words face to face." The letter wasn't filled with dramatic confessions or impossible promises. Instead, it spoke of ordinary moments that had become unforgettable. The quiet laughter after long conversations, the comfort of simply walking beside someone without needing to fill the silence, and the quiet hope that honesty would someday replace misunderstanding. Every paragraph revealed one simple truth: fear had been making decisions that the heart never wanted to make. The writer realized that both of them had spent so much time protecting themselves from disappointment that they had also protected themselves from the possibility of healing. As the final lines came into view, another surprise appeared. Tucked behind the letter was a small photograph taken years earlier. It captured an ordinary afternoon, yet the expressions on both faces held a joy that words could barely describe. On the back of the photograph, only one sentence had been written: "When you're ready to know the whole story, meet me where this memory began." There was no address, no explanation, only that mysterious invitation. The writer looked back at the photograph, trying to recognize every detail hidden in the background. Then, all at once, one forgotten landmark stood out. Their heartbeat quickened as they realized they knew exactly where the picture had been taken. "Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you." But when they finally decided to return to that place, they found something that made them question everything they thought they understood about the message. The journey back to that forgotten place felt longer than it should have. Every mile carried a memory, and every familiar landmark stirred emotions that had never truly disappeared. The writer wasn't searching for a miracle or expecting life to change overnight. They were simply following a trail left behind by someone who had finally chosen honesty over silence. The photograph remained tucked safely inside the notebook, its faded edges serving as proof that even ordinary moments can become extraordinary years later. Don't skip. Sometimes the smallest clue leads to the biggest turning point, and this was only the beginning. When the writer arrived, the place looked almost untouched by time. The old park bench still faced the quiet lake, the narrow walking path curved beneath the same towering trees, and the breeze carried the familiar sound of leaves dancing overhead. It felt as though the years between then and now had quietly disappeared. They sat down, unfolding the photograph once again, comparing every detail to the view before them. Then something unexpected caught their attention. Carved into the wooden bench were two sets of initials, nearly hidden beneath fresh layers of paint. They weren't a declaration of forever or a dramatic promise. They were simply a reminder that someone had once believed this place was worth remembering. Suddenly, another folded piece of paper slipped from a crack beneath the bench. It wasn't old like the letter. It looked recent, as though someone had left it there only a short time ago. Hands trembling with curiosity, the writer unfolded the note. The handwriting was unmistakable. It read, "If you've made it this far, thank you for giving these words a chance instead of giving up on them. I came here hoping we might cross paths, but I also knew life doesn't always follow the plans we make. Before you decide what this message means, there's one truth you deserve to hear, one I've never shared with anyone." The sentence stopped there. The rest of the page had been torn away. The missing half was nowhere to be found. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. As the writer searched the ground for the lost piece, they noticed someone standing quietly across the lake, watching from a distance. The figure slowly turned and began walking away, leaving behind one final clue that changed the direction of the entire story. Without thinking twice, the writer stood and hurried along the winding path, hoping not to lose sight of the mysterious figure. The distance between them never seemed to shrink. Every time the writer rounded a corner, the stranger was already a few steps farther ahead, moving with quiet purpose rather than urgency. It didn't feel like a chase. It felt like an invitation to keep going. Don't skip. Some of life's most meaningful moments are discovered not because we have all the answers, but because we choose not to stop searching when the path becomes uncertain. The trail eventually led to a small bookshop tucked between two historic buildings, a place the writer remembered visiting years ago. Inside, the scent of old pages and polished wood filled the air. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, each holding stories of people who had found hope after heartbreak, courage after failure, and forgiveness after misunderstanding. The stranger was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the elderly shop owner looked up with a gentle smile, as though he had been expecting a visitor. Without asking a single question, he reached beneath the counter and placed a small wrapped package on the desk. Attached to it was a handwritten note. "This belongs to the person who never stopped believing that truth deserves a second chance." The writer's heartbeat quickened. There was no name on the package, yet somehow it felt deeply personal. With careful hands, the ribbon was untied. Inside rested a worn journal, its cover marked by years of use. The first page contained only one sentence: "Before you judge what happened between us, read what I was too afraid to say out loud." As the writer slowly turned the next page, the journal began telling the story from an entirely different perspective. Every chapter revealed moments that had been misunderstood, conversations interrupted too soon, and fears hidden behind quiet smiles. It became clear that both people had been carrying the same hope while believing they were carrying it alone. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. Yet just as the writer reached the journal's most important chapter, they discovered that several pages had been carefully removed, and whoever had taken them had left behind one final message that would change everything in the next part. The missing pages left an empty space that seemed louder than every word the journal still contained. The writer slowly flipped through the gaps, hoping one overlooked sentence had survived, but there was nothing except faint impressions where the pen had once pressed into the paper. Whoever removed those pages had done it carefully, almost respectfully, as if they believed the story wasn't ready to be told all at once. Don't skip. Sometimes what is missing teaches us just as much as what remains, and this silence carried a meaning of its own. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. Tucked inside the back cover was a small folded card that hadn't been there before, or perhaps it had simply gone unnoticed. Written across the front were the words, "Truth isn't hidden to keep people apart. Sometimes it's hidden until hearts are ready to receive it." Inside, another short message appeared: if you're searching for the missing pages, don't look for them in this journal. Look for the people who lived the story beside us. The writer paused, thinking of old friends, familiar faces, and conversations that had been forgotten over the years. Memories returned one after another. There had been people who quietly encouraged honesty, others who offered wise advice, and a few who had gently stepped back, believing the two hearts would eventually find their own way. For the first time, the writer realized this journey had never been about uncovering one dramatic secret. It was about seeing how every small moment had been connected all along. With renewed determination, the writer left the bookshop carrying only the journal and the unanswered questions. The evening sky had begun to glow with soft shades of gold and blue, reminding them that even the longest day eventually gives way to a new beginning. Just then, the phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was a message from someone who hadn't reached out in years. The text was brief. "I found something that belongs to both of you. I think it's finally time we talked." Attached was a photograph of a sealed box resting on a wooden table. Across the lid, in handwriting the writer instantly recognized, were 4 unforgettable words: "Open this together, someday." The writer's heart raced. Why had that box remained hidden for so many years? And who had protected it until now? The answer waited inside. But opening it would require a conversation neither person had ever imagined having. Morning arrived with a quiet sense of anticipation. The writer barely slept, replaying every letter, every conversation, and every clue that had led to this point. The sealed box was no longer just an object, it had become a symbol of everything left unsaid. Yet one thought kept returning: why had someone written, "Open this together, someday"? It wasn't a request built on pressure. It was an invitation built on trust. Don't skip. Some stories reach their turning point not through dramatic events, but through one simple decision to show up when it matters most. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. Later that afternoon, the writer arrived at the quiet cafe mentioned in the message. It was peaceful, filled with the soft sound of conversations and the aroma of fresh coffee. Near the window sat the old friend who had sent the photograph. Time had changed both of them, but the warmth of recognition remained. Without unnecessary introductions, the friend gently placed the wooden box on the table. "I've been holding on to this for years," they admitted. "I promised I wouldn't give it to either of you unless the day came when honesty mattered more than fear." The writer looked closely at the box. There was no lock, only a small note tied around it with faded blue ribbon. It read, "If you're opening this, it means you're finally ready to listen before you judge, and to understand before you decide." Those words carried more weight than any explanation could have. The writer slowly untied the ribbon, but before the lid could be lifted, the friend quietly reached out and rested a hand on the box. "There's one thing you should know first," they said softly. "The person who wrote these letters never wanted sympathy. They only wanted the truth to be remembered the way it really happened." The room fell silent. Outside, rain began tapping gently against the windows, as if the world itself had paused for this moment. With a deep breath, the writer lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of photographs, a folded map, and one final envelope marked with the words, "Read this last." But tucked beneath everything else was a tiny key with no label and no explanation. The friend stared at it in surprise and whispered, "I don't remember that key being there." In that instant, both of them realized the journey wasn't ending. It had just revealed an entirely new mystery that neither of them had expected. The tiny key rested in the writer's palm, surprisingly heavy for something so small. It wasn't polished or decorative. It looked ordinary, the kind of key that could easily be overlooked in a drawer full of forgotten belongings. Yet everyone at the table knew it had been placed there for a reason. The friend carefully spread the photographs across the table instead of rushing to the final envelope. Each picture captured simple moments: a walk through a familiar neighborhood, laughter during a community event, a quiet afternoon by the lake. None of them looked extraordinary, but together they told the story of two lives that had crossed paths more often than either person had ever realized. Don't skip. Sometimes the biggest discoveries are hidden inside memories we once considered too ordinary to remember. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you. The folded map revealed another surprise. Several places had been circled in blue ink, but one location stood out from all the others. It was an old community library that had recently been restored after years of being closed. The writer smiled faintly, remembering how often they had visited that building without ever knowing someone else had been there on many of the very same days. Scribbled in the corner of the map were a few handwritten words: "Every meaningful story deserves one final chapter. This is where ours begins again." There was no pressure hidden in the message, no promise that everything would be perfect. It simply invited one honest conversation. The writer realized that the journey had never been about chasing the past. It had always been about finding the courage to face the present with an open heart. As the afternoon faded into evening, the writer and the friend walked toward the old library, carrying the box, the journal, and the unanswered questions. The building stood quietly beneath the golden light of sunset, welcoming visitors with its familiar wooden doors. The writer slipped the tiny key into a small brass lock on an old storage cabinet tucked inside the entrance hall. To everyone's surprise, it turned effortlessly. The cabinet door opened with a gentle creak, revealing a neatly arranged collection of letters, journals, and one small recording device. Resting on top was a fresh note written in the same unmistakable handwriting. "If you've reached this place, you're finally ready to hear the part of the story I could never fit onto paper." The writer reached toward the recorder, but before pressing play, footsteps echoed softly through the quiet library. Someone had just entered, and the sound of that familiar voice changed everything before a single recording could begin. The footsteps slowed as they crossed the polished wooden floor, each one echoing through the quiet library. The writer didn't turn around immediately. Some moments deserve a single deep breath before they become memories. The old recording.